Welcome to the Black Male Impact. Today we have as guest Dr. Joaquin Wallace. Dr. Wallace, welcome to the Black Male Impact.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the interview.
Man, it's a pleasure. But before we get into the conversation, Dr. Wallace have over 20 years experience in education, advocacy, and financial service. He's also an author. He's also passionate about empowering individuals, families, and communities. But before we get into the questions itself, I will ask Dr. Wallace to share with us more about himself so we can get more familiar about who he is before we get into the question. Dr. Wallace.
Appreciate that. So my name is Dr. Joaquin Wallace. I'll start with I'm married with three beautiful daughters, actually 32, 28, and 22 now, and one granddaughter. Been married for 28 years. Got into the financial services business as a byproduct of me. Actually, I was a head basketball coach at San Francisco State for 10 years, and I left that and needed to reinvent myself. And so by doing so, I got into financial services. And my first appointment, if you will, was Aflac. As we hear, we have the Aflac duck, and I was an insurance salesman of supplement health insurance for Aflac. And then from there, I got into the actual financial services, went to Prudential from there, and that's where I'm currently at right now. Picked up several licenses, and I'm a financial planner as we speak. I'm also a teacher at the University of Golden Gate University in San Francisco. I teach investments and public policy, and I teach marketing to a group of high school students for it's kind of like a co-op dual from high school to college at the junior college system at Chabot College, where I teach marketing, which is my major. My MBA is in marketing, so I enjoy doing that as well. And you do a lot of things, have a lot of irons in the fire. Currently, right now, I'm on a path, if you will, of stressing the importance of education. I think that's so important in the African American community, and creating a financial footprint is probably even more important in the African American community. I trademarked the slogan, generational wealth begins with generational knowledge, which is important because oftentimes we hear the word generational wealth, but we have no idea of what it really means and how to take the footprints towards that. And so I'm on a path to try to create an educational piece around that. I created a model, which is a generational wealth model, a 7-stage model that kind of encapsulates all of the steps that's required to get to generational wealth.
Man, I really love that. Generation wealth begins with generational knowledge. And I think knowing how to is really important, because you hear a lot that we need to create generational wealth, but we need to know how to create the wealth. So gaining the knowledge is really important, man. And I really love your commitment to our community, because we have to take charge of where we want to go. And as individuals with the knowledge and experience, it's important that we participate in changing the narrative for especially the Black community. So, man, I really commend you on your commitment. And I also hear that you also be with the students, preparing them before they get to college, which is really great. So I can tell it's not just the knowledge that you're sharing with them in marketing, but also your experience, which is really good for those young people. So I'm going to get into the questions that I have here. So my first question is, what is the mindset that it takes to create a positive impact?
I think the biggest thing in terms of the mindset to create a positive impact is that I think first and foremost, you have to feel good about yourself. It's so important that you have confidence about yourself, that you feel good about yourself, because if you have that feeling, you have more of a servant leadership type of role. Therefore, you can create the positive vibe around you and be willing to share. I think the biggest thing is the opportunity to communicate, the opportunity to share your experiences are important, especially with older individuals like myself, right? To be able to give back. I always recall, a conversation I had with my dad, when I first went to college. Went to college to play baseball. And he asked me the question, so what do you want to do in life? And I said to him, I want to leave footprints. And that was in 1983, right? And I said, I wanted to leave footprints. And today I see myself doing that. And I find myself as a vessel to all those individuals, as a role model to help them create that GPS to navigate towards success. And I think once you have the opportunity to give and to articulate your experiences is so important. And how you feel about yourself gives off that positive vibe to those individuals around you.
Man, I really appreciate you sharing that, because to make change, as you mentioned, yeah, we do need to feel good about ourselves, because in life there will be challenges, and if we feel good about who we are, we can push through those challenges. And I also like your commitment, as I'll continue to say, because I know that's what you're doing. Your commitment to leaving a footprint, giving people a way to go forward to make their lives better. And I think that is important as we talk about or think about creating positive change, because again, no one is going to do some of the things that needs to be done for us. It's something that we have to do, and it's going to take a commitment. And it's really important, as you mentioned, that we feel good about ourselves. And that leads me to my next question. What advice do you have for the men listening and how they can play a role in creating positive change?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that you can do as a role model is be available. Oftentimes, we hear about the absence of those individuals to provide, to be tangible, that they can touch, they can feel, they can articulate with, they can communicate with, which is important because you can read about individuals, you can see them on TV, you can watch on podcasts such as this, social media, but to really have an impact, the opportunity for those individuals to touch you is so important. And I mean, not touch you, physically touching you, just be there in your presence, and they can ask questions because they want to see someone that looks like them, but have the ability to blend in where they're not talking down to them. And I think that's so important because I use myself as an example. A lot of people don't know all of the accolades that I've accomplished in my life. And when they Google me, whatnot, or they begin to talk to me, they always say, so why you don't ever talk about that? Why? Because that's not important. Because what I don't want to do, as I always say, I don't want to wear it on my sleeve. I don't want to enter a room or enter an environment when I give this vibe where I'm better than you or more educated than you or have accomplished more than you. So I don't talk about those things. What I meet you where you're at. And if you ask the questions, then I can answer them for you. But I don't lead with that information. It's kind of organic for me. We'll begin talking and they start asking me questions about my experiences and things of that nature. And then we get into it. But I firmly believe that you have to be able to meet them where they're at and don't talk down to them. Don't talk at them. Get to their level, get to know them, and listen to what their concerns are. And then you have a better opportunity to impact those individuals.
Man, thanks for sharing that. And I will just go back to your point of being available, because people have been hurt a lot of times. And if we say we're going to do something and don't show up, I think that continue the hurt. So being available, being present whenever we say we're going to do something is important. But also really like the point that we have made. When we show up, at times we don't have to always start with what we have accomplished. Sometimes, as you mentioned during the conversation, that can comes up, which can be an inspiration for other people. But sometimes people may get intimidated if they think you're better than they are. And sometimes that will cause the disconnect or lack of the ability to make the connection especially when we want to make a positive impact. So I really appreciate that reminder, and also something to think about when we're trying to uplift others, because not all people will at first be inspired by the accomplishment. Some people will be intimidated. So I really appreciate that perspective when it comes to creating positive change, because that's the goal of what we should aim for, as especially as Black men, especially on the path of overcoming our own challenges and starting to achieve our own goals. The next thing for us should be to uplift others and make this place better than we found it. And that leads me to my next question. How can we, as Black men, help to change the narrative today?
Well, I think that's kind of like a kind of dovetails into the prior question. Again, availability. I think that's so important in the athletic world. You always say the best ability is availability, right? And so,
That's right.
looking at from that perspective, the best ability is availability, right? If I'm available for you, if I'm in a position where I can answer questions or just be there as a tangible role model, showing up. If you have children, showing up at the game, going to their school, constantly communicating with them, being in their lives, taking advantage of those moments is so important. And being there in the community in some kind of way. It could be coaching, it could be taking advantage of workshops and things of that nature, where you can be that tangible role model. Someone can actually see you again, as we said in the previous question. Those are all important because once you see individuals like yourself, then you can believe that you can do it. And I always, I'm writing a blog right now actually upon this, and I always say, use myself as an example. When I grew up, the role models were drug dealers, street pharmaceutical salesmen,
That's right.
athletes, and entertainers, right? But education was not one of those. I chose athletics. That was my way of getting out of my current situation. But education to me is so important, because if I would have seen someone who had a bachelor's, who had a master's, or even a doctor, PhD, JD, whatever the case may be, therefore I would have said, I could do that. I could actually do that as well. But those were not role models that I seen. So it's important for us to put ourselves in a position that we can actually say, you can do this as well too, because this may not be an option that they even consider.
Correct.
So if we can put ourselves in a position where you can act, those are athletes, right? They're just obviously it's a great living if you can make it, but it's a small percentage of those that actually do make it.
Correct.
But we do know, whether it's in trade, having a trade is important. Electricians, right? Carpenters and things of that nature is important, extremely important. Education is extremely important. And if you can showcase that there are individuals that are out there that has not fell into some of the statistical norms that we see, right? These are options for you as well. And then you will see an uptick, in my opinion, an uptick of those individuals actually pursuing those type of careers.
Man, I really appreciate that as you go back to the availability. But whilst you were sharing, not seeing the examples when you were growing up, but you have the desire to pursue education, but you use athletics as the way out. But just listening to you, and I know that you focus on financial service and help to educate our community more about the financial literacy. You talk about the knowledge, but how receptive are our community to the knowledge and how to become more financially literate? And if you don't mind, you can speak about the men versus women, or just in general.
Here's the deal with that,
Yeah.
right? So we know in the African American community that financial conversations are non-existent. I mean, that's just the way it is. We know that. And so my goal, as I mentioned earlier, I created a 7-stage generational wealth model. And we'll go over the stages. So stage 1 is the most important stage. It's the internal and external ecosystem. What that means is that you embrace and learn about finances through your internal and external ecosystem. So internally means walls in. That's your culture. Those are conversations or lack thereof.
Okay.
And external is what you see outside the door. So when I walk outside my social economic system, what I see, my self-actualization, my self-esteem, my social environment, my safety, is when I walk out the door. Now, society says, and it provides for you a somewhat of an unrealistic template on what financial success means, right? So we see that. So you see it a lot oftentimes when someone, a professional athlete, they sign a contract or someone receives a lot of money or an inheritance, small inheritance, large inheritance, they immediately buy into what society externally says what's important. And that could be purchasing a car, that could be purchasing jewelry, the more materialistic things, but that's not important. But society is saying that. And so what we're trying to do consistently is become rich. Rich is temporary. That's not sustainable. And we've seen that with the evidence. So stage one leads to stage two. And stage two basically says, now this is your financial genetic code. This is who you are based upon stage one. So stage two merges into two. It kind of splits into two areas: financial trauma, financial anxiety. We know that we come from a lot of financial trauma based upon our internal and external ecosystem. We also know that we have financial anxiety based upon our internal and external ecosystem. Stage three basically says reprogramming your financial genetic code, which is important because now we have to go back and say, hey, listen, all the stuff that you learned from your external and external ecosystem, good, bad, or indifferent, we need to go in and reprogram that now. We have to reprogram that. So that goes to your stage two, which is your financial trauma and anxiety. But what we do know in stage three, in reprogramming your financial genetic code, I don't have the hard data, but we do know that a lot of divorces are a byproduct of finances, right? We know that. And so my theory basically suggests this. You have two people merging into a marriage. Both of those individuals come from a different internal and external ecosystem, right? And so they're bringing financial trauma and baggage into this marriage. Therefore, you may have one person that's very conservative. You have one person that doesn't have any boundaries in regards to finance, don't really understand what it means. So with that being said, they're not able to build and grow. Now, having said that, if you are an adult, you can always go back to your childhood when you've seen that, which affected you in terms of your financial trauma, anxiety, reprogramming your financial genetic code. So then you move to stage four, which is financial edification. Financial edification means uplifting, morally, building, spiritually. And that splits into two areas too, which is financial literacy, which we talked about, and financial inclusion. Financial literacy is so important because you're not able to participate in the market today, so to speak, purchasing a home, the things that you need to do, you're not able to do, right? Don't have the proper credit. You don't have the proper savings. You don't have the mechanism to learn how to save. So those are, and you're carrying a lot of debt. So it's virtually impossible for you to go out and purchase a home. And if you do purchase a car or things of that nature, you're paying high interest rates, right? We've seen that. But then the other side is financial inclusion. Financial inclusion is so important when I meet with a lot of my clients, because that is where you have to have a true understanding of when you're working at a particular company, how to take advantage of the 401k, 403b, 457 plans, life insurance, things of that nature. But here's the thing about stage, in terms of when you go to stage four, financial edification. Many people, I believe, I would say about 80, 90% of the population that participates in any type of 401k or qualified plan at work, they only do so because someone told them to. They have no true understanding of what they're doing, their risk tolerance level, and things of that nature. So when they get to their retirement piece, right, down the line, 20, 30 years, they don't have the capital that they thought they would have. But also you have a lot of people in stage four and inclusion who don't participate in those plans because of the financial trauma and the internal external ecosystem. Because we're so ingrained in our head is that we need to get all of our money. If I make $1,000, I need all 1,000. Don't take anything out. I don't understand the 401. I don't understand deferred comp. I don't understand that. I want all of my money versus saying, hey, you know what? I will get taxed at a lower rate because you will. But those are opportunities that go by the wayside.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, stage 5 basically suggests this. Everybody wants financial well-being. Everybody wants to be in a position when they do get to the day of when they have their soft landing, which I refer to as the runway, soft landing on your runway, the retirement stage. The only thing that you want is the ability to live your life without having any financial stress.
Okay.
Everybody's financial well-being is different. One person's financial well-being may be living on a boat. Another person's financial well-being may be having an expensive house with several cars, travel around the world. Two people are different, but it goes back to, again, stage 1, your internal and external ecosystem, which is a byproduct. Again, if you go back to stage 3, this is why you have issues when you have people in union marriages, because two people may not have the same idea of what financial well-being is. So therefore, there's some confusion. There is some lack of opportunities, if you will, right? Because they just don't know what it is.
Correct.
And so, as I said earlier, in stage 1 in the external ecosystem, it suggests that rich is what we're all trying to become. But we do know that people who have inherited money, who won the lottery, have lost their winnings, and 70% have lost within a year. Right? We've seen that, right? Because of no financial edification. We know that. But again, rich is temporary. Correct. Financial well-being is longevity. That's what we're trying to get to. Stage 6 is generational knowledge, which is the most important piece. Okay. Because how do I get to generational wealth without generational knowledge? I have to understand what an estate plan is. I have to understand what insurance is. I have to understand what long-term care is. I have to understand what investments is. This is where your generational knowledge comes into play, because then you're creating your financial footprints to generational wealth. That's why I say it's virtually impossible to get to generational wealth
without the stages.
Generational knowledge. And Aretha Franklin, Prince, we can go down the line of these individuals.
Correct.
Who passed away and was not able to transfer their wealth in probate, things of that nature, because they didn't have the simple things in place. So when you ask the question in a community, how receptive is it? Well, it's a topic that's not spoken about, because it's like that. It's the one thing that we can talk about everything else. We can talk about travel, health, what's going on. But the one thing is like a taboo. We don't talk about financial information. But what we do know is that those who are really in tune with their financial, in terms of generational wealth, they have someone actually that they communicate with, that they talk to, that they trust, that they acquiesce all of their information to get them to that point. Those who don't typically struggle.
Man, that's a wealth of knowledge, and I hope that we can have further conversation about creating wealth within our community, because I do know that our upbringing, as you mentioned, the different ecosystem that we experience, does affect who we are, and it does impact how we look at money and how we go about accumulating wealth. But as you mentioned, the number 6 part, all those pieces in between to trauma before we get to the knowledge, we have to understand what are the things that may be the cause for the way we react or act when it comes to when individuals are trying to tell us about, the ways to create wealth, from the insurance and different parts of creating wealth. So, man, we will talk more about that piece, because I think that's something that is important within our community, especially when we're trying to break the cycle to create wealth, not just for us, but we can start something, a legacy that the next generation will be better off than we are today. But I really appreciate that perspective, that knowledge, that information you share, and how we can create wealth. That leads me to my next question. What or who has influenced or inspired you to pursue the path that you're on today?
Oh man, do we have enough time for that one? I think who inspired me was my lack of financial literacy. Using myself as an example, I was within the stages, I was in all of them,
Okay.
basically, at one point in my life. But I think a couple of things. Once I was exposed and being in meetings. So when I first started off as an insurance, with insurance, I was in a lot of high level meetings,
Okay.
and they weren't people of color. So I was kind of an entrepreneur, just trying to learn, an apprentice, if you will, in these meetings. And one thing that struck a chord with me was that all of these individuals that were in these meetings that I was sitting in on didn't look like me, for one, but they all had a plan, and they all really would. It was a derivative of how do I make it more, how can I transfer my wealth to my beneficiaries? What do I need to do? How do I need to make it happen? And they were it was like they were listening, they was receiving the information, but it never was about them. It was always about their kids. It was always about their spouse. It was always about other people outside of themselves. And once I seen that, I said, well, that's the part that I'm missing. That's the part that our community is missing, because we're constantly thinking about ourselves. And oftentimes, I just had this conversation a couple of days ago. We, in some cases, you may have been a beneficiary of generational wealth. You may have, small, but it may have happened. But going forward, as you mentioned, breaking the cycle, this perpetual cycle, it is your job to make sure that you create the financial footprints for your generation. You may not be able to experience the generational wealth. You may not, but it's not for you anyway. Your job is to create the financial footprints for your beneficiaries to receive the generational wealth, the legacy, if you will. And so again, it goes back to stage 5. What you want, what I want, and you want is financial well-being. That's what we want. We want to be in a position when we finally retire or do the things we want, working, if you will, that we can do the things that we want to do, enjoy life, and not have any financial stress. That's what we want. Now, if we can create the financial footprints, which is stage 6, the generational knowledge, we've done our job. And that's the conversation that I seen, that had the opportunity to sit in on, that we were lacking in our community.
And that is important, the exposure. And a lot of times, not a lot of us do get the exposure. As you said, just being in those spaces really give you the opportunity to say, you know what, maybe I need to do something. And that's what not all of us get. And sometimes some of us are afraid to be in those spaces because they're going to go and there's no one who looks like us in those spaces. And then because of fear, we choose not to, not realizing that, it could give us an opportunity to learn. And we all have to learn from someone when we don't know. We just have to be willing to learn. So that point that you shared with who influenced us, we have to be open and have to realize that we can be the one to create that financial footprint. It can start with us, but it's a willingness that we have to be that person, to take on the challenges, to learn, to create that which we didn't have, and to realize that what we are creating may not benefit us right now, but it can benefit generations to come. And that can't be stressed enough, but that's what we have to do if we're going to break the cycle. Man, that's really great what you shared, just to be willing to learn from others and make the commitment to learn. And that's led me to my next question. What is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
Wow. I mean, that's okay. So that's a lot to talk about.
That's right.
I do believe that Black men of today, they are more willing to be involved with their children. That's the one thing I see.
Okay.
They are willing to be that vessel and be that role model, that protector. And there's more Black men as married too. I mean, there are a lot of African American couples that are married, so that the media has a different narrative, but
Correct.
we do know that that's not true.
Correct.
And they do want to be, they want to have families. They want to be the protector. They want to leave the legacy. They want to create generational wealth. I see that they're trying to become, they're more entrepreneur, looking at other avenues that's untraditional than it once was when I was, growing up. So there's more opportunities, more spaces for them to get into. So I do see they're very aggressive in trying to create their own narrative and create their own path, and being there for their children, being great husbands, being in the community. And I think that's important. Now what you see in media doesn't suggest that, but we know that's not true. So I do see them actually being more apparent, more
Family oriented.
aggressive in those areas to try to say, listen, we're here too, and we want to be available for our community, for our wives, and for our kids. So I do see that, and they're taking a variety of different approaches, whether it's through the entrepreneurial route or through the educational route, being advocates, so to speak. So I do see a trend, an upward tick. And I think with social media, it actually benefits because now you actually can see what they're doing. They have a platform to showcase their works.
Well, that is true in regards to we have been fed a lot of false narratives when it comes to us as Black men. If we pay attention to the medias that we have no control over. But as you mentioned, with the social media, we get to see for ourselves that Black men are being present in the homes and taking care of their kids, pursuing their own entrepreneurial journey. And as you mentioned, with an uptick, I remember a few years ago when I started my doctoral journey and start to look for Black men, I was surprised the amount of Black men who were superintendents with PhDs. And that's not something that we have been shown. It wasn't something that have been modeled. So we can be more aware that, man, there are a lot of men out there doing well from entrepreneurial standpoint, from academia. And it really opened my eyes to what you alluded to, what you just said, that Black men are doing more. And the same thing with families. I remember I was talking to this lady and she was charged to give, go after the Black men for like child support stuff. And she was, with her own research, she realized that Black men wanted to be a part of their families, but because of the system and how it seems, and she changed from trying to oppress the Black males to be an advocate for Black men because she realized that what she was fed about Black men and not wanting to be there was not true. So go back to what you said. Black men want to be there, want to be in their family's life and provide for their family, for their wife and kids, and do the great things that sometimes are not covered on the media that we have no control over. So that is really great to see that we are not showing up in the world as how society may have painted the picture, and that there are Black men out here doing the work or being great examples and role models for others, for the younger generation to see through us what is possible. As go back to what you've said, that it's easier to become what you see. As you say, you're working on that block to remind us that we can be the example because it's easier for the next generation to know and believe what's possible through our own examples. And thanks for sharing that perspective because it is something that needs to be said and we can't say it enough because we know we're countering the false narrative when it comes to us as Black men. So my next question is, what was a pivotal moment in your life?
Well, so I mean, I've had several. So currently today, I think the most pivotal point in my life is realizing that if I go back to my model, that I was getting to the point where I'm going to have to retire, that I'm not going to be able to work for the rest of my life, right? I mean, it's important. And I needed to become educated and understand how this financial machine works. And I mean, it was hard. It was a difficult choice because I knew that I made a lot of mistakes in regards to managing my money. And that was just a byproduct of me not knowing. And we hear that a lot in our community. Well, I didn't know. Well, I really didn't know. I didn't know what was going on. I'm making the money, but I'm spending the money. My financial literacy wasn't there. My credit score wasn't in a position. I wasn't saving money. I didn't understand what debt was. I really didn't understand all of these things. And I knew that after I retired from coaching college basketball, I needed to transition to something else that's going to teach me that and position me so when I have my soft landing, to when I get to my financial well-being, I will not have financial stress, right? Because we're all going through that. And so I think from that point, that's what drove me to where we're at today. And also, I mean, God put me in a position, spiritually put me in a position to say, okay, that was one point of your life. Now we're going to move to another point in your life. Because prior to that, I had a nonprofit organization, Project Transition. We did a lot of good work from 1997 to 2003. 2003, I was recognized as one of the most influential African Americans in the 21st century. So you're talking about me, Barack Obama, Oprah Winfrey. I mean, all of these luminaries is in this encyclopedia as was the most influential in the history of African Americans during this time. I was in Essence magazine in 2003 in a section called the Now section, the first African American man in that section. A lot of these topics I don't really talk about because that was in the past, but a lot of people know about it. So I've had the opportunity of being in a position of helping people, and then from a nonprofit, then coaching, obviously, and then this was a different segment. So now we're in a different segment because now I firmly believe, and you can attest to this, I believe that your bachelor's degree is for your parents. Your master's degree is for you because now you've determined, okay, this is what I like to do. I'm going to pursue this at this point. But once you get your doctorate degree, PhD, JD, ED, any one of those terminal degrees, your job now is to uplift the culture. Your job now is to elevate. Your job now is to teach and to transfer knowledge. And once I understood that, I took myself out the equation. My job now is to transfer knowledge. Right. My job now is to give information. My job now is to be a role model, to be someone they can that's tangible, they can relate to, they can talk to. And I spend a lot of my time when I meet with individuals that are not in school or in school or whatever they're at in their path, is to always say, you can do better. Correct. You can do more. You can continue to educate yourself. Don't be afraid to continue to educate yourself because education unshackles the enslavement in your mind. It really does. It gives you a different perspective on what to do, how to do it, more rational thinking. And it allows you to think outside the box. It allows you to continue to move forward, and it keeps you sharp in what you do. And so I'm very, very, very adamant about that. So that was what drove me, is the fact that, okay, here I am in one moment. Okay, that phase of my life is over. What do I do today? Now I'm tasked to go out and educate in a way that people can relate. So I don't really wear it on my sleeve the model that I created, to me, is so important because it's leaving footprints, it's legacy. And I do believe that people will go back to this model at some point when I'm long and gone and cite this model because it's going to be so important in uplifting a culture. And it's not race-based. Yeah. I always make that clear. It's not race-based. It's basically every individual is on the model, and they have really went through one of the 6 stages anyway, because you want to get to the 7th stage.
Oh yeah, man. That is just listening to you and your experience and knowledge. it is inspiring and empowering, I should say, because we need the insights from those who not just have the knowledge, but have gone through the experience to get the knowledge. As you mentioned, we're at a stage now where once you achieve certain things, it's our responsibility to help the next generation, to uplift the next generation, and to help them to see through us. I will continue to say what is possible. And just your experience, and I know you said something that I was trying to make sure I get it, where knowledge unshackle. What did he say about knowledge unshackle?
Enslaves it basically unshackles the enslavement in your mind.
Unshackles the enslavement in your mind. And I think a lot of us, man, we grew up in this environment where we have been limited. As you mentioned, that the pivotal moment in your life is when you realize that you had to make the change. But a lot of us sometimes realize that we need to make the change, but we don't have the know-how to make the change. And because we don't have the knowledge to make the change, we remain stuck in that space that we want to be liberated from. And just listening to you, I think a lot of people need to hear from you the knowledge you have, the experience, and how you get to this point. Because a lot of us are not exposed to the understanding and how we can overcome. Some of us may not even understand where we are, why we do the things that we do. And without that awareness, we end up staying where we are, and then we pass that on to the next generation. Then the next generation continue to do the same thing. But man, it's just empowering listening to your knowledge from doing the nonprofit and the experience you had and the impact that you have been having within our community. It's just impressive. And we need to highlight those things at times. Sometimes I know you mentioned that you don't really like to share that part unless it gets to that part of when in the conversation. But as you have alluded to, where it's easier to become what we see, because just hearing your story and your experience, it's inspiring, and it really will empower us that's coming behind that man. It's possible to overcome and achieve on a higher level. But I really appreciate you sharing, that experience and that part of your journey to us, the listeners, and to everyone that's tuning in to the Black Male Impact. But I will get to my next question. What life lesson have you learned late in life that you believe is important and can benefit this current generation?
I think being a servant leader. I mean, I think that's the most important thing. No agenda, really trying to uplift from the bottom up, because I think that's important, because as we continue to elevate or ascend, so to speak, you want to always, what they say, never forget where you came from.
Correct.
You always want to reach back and pull as many with you as you can. And that's my goal, is really to just articulate that out, be that person. And as you mentioned, yes, I could do better in terms of putting myself out there and doing those things, but I never was really comfortable living in a fish tank. I've always liked to have my privacy, so to speak. But in some cases, you have to, people have to know exactly what you do.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to get more comfortable with that as I've gotten older, because I'm not in it for the vanity of it all. I'm not trying to become an international star. I'm not trying to get likes on my Instagram page. Understand that now I'm doing more podcasts. I'm being brought on shows, if you would, to kind of talk about my model and things of that nature. I'm creating my own podcast as well. So, I'm getting comfortable with that environment and that space. But again, it's something that I had to get used to as well, because again, I was never really comfortable living in a fish tank. And but now understanding that now, I know that's important, because it can help those that are aspiring or trying to do things like me, or I want you to be better than I am, whatever I've done. And so I think it's important they can see and relate to someone like myself.
Well, and why it's also important because not everyone is going to get the opportunity to talk to you directly or to be in the space that you are with all the knowledge and experience that is beneficial. So, and that's at times we think we don't want to, but if we don't, at times we will not reach all the people that are supposed to reach. And again, I would say not everyone will have the opportunity to talk with you directly, but and you have a wealth of knowledge that can benefit all of us within our community to, as you mentioned, to uplift from the bottom up, so we can achieve more of what is possible and to break the cycle. But before I ask my final question, I want to know where the listeners can find and support the work that you're doing to make a difference. So please share where they can connect with you to learn more about your work and to maybe reach out to you to get you to share some of what you're doing, the knowledge that you have with them.
So I have a webpage. It's called drjwallace.com. It's a webpage that has a lot of my blogs that I've written, and I want to let everyone know that I'm going with 2 blogs this month. One of the blogs is I hope you read it. I think it's going to be kind of like a roll call, if you will. But one of my blogs is going to be why education and obtaining a trade is so important in the African American community. So it's one of my blogs, and I'm really excited to release that one. And then I'm releasing another one about a blog about myself. You know, my plight, if you will, from where I started to where I'm at today. I mean, I think that's important. And so you'll find those on drjwallace.com. We'll be having my podcast, which is called the New Wealth Wave podcast, Spotify, Apple, all the social media outlets out there. That's going to be releasing later on in the month of October. And you can always, again, you can reach out to me on my website, drjwallace.com. Send me a message and we can talk, if you will, kind of go over some stuff. I do a lot of workshops free to the community in regards to the generational wealth model. Just kind of go through it. And, one area that I think that differentiates me from a lot of individuals that are out there is not only am I able to go through the model itself and, kind of see where you're at, but I'm a financial advisor. And so I'm a true financial advisor. So not only I have fiduciary responsibility to provide for you the best answers to your specific objectives and goals. So which is important.
Correct.
Because not only I can help you and tell you what to do, I can create a financial plan to help you achieve it as well. And so I think that's important, and which takes me out of the loop of just selling information. And I think that's what you find a lot on social media and Instagram and things of that nature, Twitter, Facebook. They're constantly selling, okay, life insurance. This is what you need to do. This is how you need to do it. And they're only giving you 25% of the answer, right? It's not the full answer, but it sounds good. So you get a lot of inquiries. Why I need to do this? Why I need to do that? Well, they're only giving you 25% of the answer. And that's because they're only able to do one thing. And so as a financial planner, so you have the ability to do a multitude of things. And so you're always going to be looking at it from the best interest of the person that you're sitting across the table from.
Okay, man, that's really important because again, it goes back to not having the knowledge. We hear some of the things that we need to do, but we don't know all the steps or the best way to go about it, or what we need to do prior to, or what we need to do after we gain the knowledge of what we need to do to move forward on the financial level. But I'll definitely share ways to connect with you in the description. So even though they listen and they hear the website and ways to connect, I will also put it in the description so they can reach out to you whenever they listen to this conversation. Because, man, you have shared a whole lot, especially those 7 different steps that we need to become aware of, from understanding how we have been impacted, how our environment conditioned us, to gaining the knowledge and how to move forward. So I really appreciate that, what you share from that financial standpoint. So my final question is, what impact do you want to have on the world? I know you shared it a few times throughout the conversation, but what impact do you want to have on the world?
Simple. I just want to leave footprints. I mean, positive footprints. And thus far, I've been able to do so, and I will continue to walk that path. No pun intended, right? And leave the footprints. But I will continue to do that. I will continue to share my knowledge. I will continue to be available for those who want to listen and learn and ask questions. I love asking questions. I love having these conversations, because those are conversations I wish I would have had growing up as well. And I love being a role model. I really do. I really didn't embrace it before, as I mentioned to you, living in a fish tank. I never really wanted to do that, but now found as I got older, I do have an ability to motivate individuals. I mean, I do. And I guess it's because the way I deliver, it's not really one, and not braggadocious or things of that nature. I would always say to someone, just Google me. and then that stops the conversation. I don't need to wear it on my sleeve. But at the end of the day, I want to leave footprints. And while I'm here, that's what I will continue to do.
Man, that's great. And as I said earlier in the conversation, I'll look forward to having another conversation. As I told someone recently, that I will be doing some lives going forward, maybe starting soon, to have these conversations, share where people can engage in the moment and talk about and learn about what they need to do to go forward. And financial literacy is one of those things that really needs to be talked about, and very often, because it's not something that we're going to hear one time or we're going to get it. It's something that I believe we need to hear over and over for it to become a part of our consciousness. So it becomes a part of who we are as we go forward, to be liberated or to be unshackled from whatever we have been conditioned to think about ourselves that sometimes limit us. We need to break away from all that. So having someone like you to share your knowledge, your experience, I think it would be really beneficial to all of us, to our community, so we can break some of those cycles as we go forward. But Dr. Wallace, man, it was a pleasure having you here on the Black Male Impact, man. The knowledge that you shared, the insights, the perspective, it was well received. And I know the listeners have received it well as well.
Well, I appreciate it. Again, I would love to be a part of the roundtable, whatever you have going forward.
Yes.
So always keep me included. Again, they can always go to so it's drjwallace.com. Take a look at a couple of blogs I've already released. I'll be releasing more, and we'll be posting podcast snippets as well on there. Various podcasts I've been have appeared on, including this one here. When it's all said, don't get it clipped up. And I'll put that on there as well. I think it's going to be dynamic, and look for this model to really start taking off going forward.
Oh yeah, man. That's great. That's great. And listeners, as always, the goal is to bring guests that we believe will be beneficial to you, that will be able to impart knowledge, insights, and perspective that can help all of us to move forward. And on the Black Male Impact, our goal is to inspire positive change. And we know that's what Dr. Wallace have just did, help us to realize what we can do to move forward, to break the cycle, and to be the best that we can be as we go forward. So thanks again for being here on the Black Male Impact. As always, we're looking forward to your support and your whatever you can do to support us as we continue on this journey. Thanks again for being here with us.